I feel like in Hollywood, there's so many projects or pieces of media that are just sort of made in a black box without any kind of input from, the audience. And then they sort of then come out and bring it out to the world. And they're like, what do you guys think? And it's kind of a crapshoot, right? Sometimes people love it and some people hate it. But what if, you can open up that process so that, sort of like the super fans are engaged from the very beginning and they can help you, understand what sort of their taste is.
On today's Artist Spotlight, we chat with Emily Yang, aka Pplpleasr. She's an insanely creative, multidisciplinary artist based out of New York City. Her influences include animated films, the underground music scene, video games, and traditional Chinese and Japanese art. We cover a few of her projects, including her decentralized storytelling in Shibuya. With that, this is Pplpleasr. I am joined today by Pplpleasr. It is so good to have you on the podcast. This is a long time coming. I'm glad we made it happen.
I know. I'm so excited. I've been waiting for this.
Yeah, we first connected because I had the pleasure to attend the A16Z Crypto Summit. Went out there, and you were a guest speaking on stage, and saw your everything that you were up to, or at least that you were presenting at that time. And it was just fascinating. Like, you have a great background, fantastic story. You've built a lot in Web3. And as usual, when I have someone on that's new to the show, we'd love to hear that backstory, that origin story of how you got started in Web3, and then walk us up to present day, like what you've been building and what you've been launching. Absolutely.
Well, unfortunately, I can't do it, as interactive and with a 200-person audience like what I did at the conference, but I'll try my best. So my sort of journey into crypto or Web3 in general, I would say my relationships started in 2017, where that was when I bought crypto for the first time. Really the reason was just that I had been working in visual effects and computer graphics and animation for quite a few years before this, working on Hollywood movies. And then I had saved up a little bit of money. We're talking about just a few $1,000s. And then I was trying to find a way to invest my money. And I remember, talking to my parents, they said that that kind of amount is not really, significant enough to do anything in traditional finance. And then also, I didn't really understand buying stocks or, bonds or anything like that. And then so, naturally I gravitated towards the internet and then found the subreddit of cryptocurrency. I started reading all about it. And sort of like the entire concept of the blockchain and everything around provenance just made a lot of sense to me. And then so that was when I was like, oh, I think this is a good way for young people to start investing their money when they don't have a lot. And it's also sort of available 24/7 as opposed to like a regular bank. And so, that's pretty much why I bought my first crypto. But instead of buying Bitcoin and Ethereum back then, I thought, well, since those ones are already really popular, I'm going to find the next big gem. And then so I just kind of went all in on the 2017 ICO shitcoins. And I think I bought mostly VeChain at the time because they were actually talking about a concept which is, similar to NFTs today, which is sort of verifying luxury goods or, like food using the blockchain. And I found that very interesting. And that's kind of why I bought it back then. So then fast forward to 2020, I sort of lost my job and then I became unemployed. And then I was, sort of forced to look into alternate revenue streams again. This is when I sort of, rediscovered crypto once again. And then I found crypto Twitter. And when I was browsing crypto Twitter, I realized that there were all these sort of narratives around crypto and DeFi that were being, promoted in the form of memes, but always sort of very lo-fi memes that were being made on Microsoft Paint, let's say. And, obviously being unemployed and sort of seeking an opportunity for myself, I saw that this was a chance for me to basically create a job for myself. And then so I put my animation skills to use And I remember I made my first animation for a year in finance at the time. And then DeFi was quite a small circle back then. So it was easy to sort of get the word around. And so through word of mouth, I basically started making a little business for myself, just selling my animation skills to DeFi companies. And and about 20 something animations later, I made the Unisoft V3 animation back in March 2021. And then I also decided to sort of auction it off as an NFT. And because the video had went really viral, and then so the NFT itself did really well as well, and sold for, I think it was 310 Ethereum at the time. And something else that was really cool that happened as a result.
What was that in USD?
At the time of sale, it was around $525,000.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, I obviously
that's amazing.
Never would have thought. I remember, putting it up for auction and talking to the Unisoft team and saying, oh, I think, anything from 10 ETH to like USD six-figure value, like $100,000 would be the most that my brain can even fathom. So when it went up to $500,000, I was just like, what is going on? But I think the coolest part of that sale wasn't that it sold for, that amount, but actually that an entire DAO had sort of formed around this, because the bidding had gotten so crazy that a lot of the supporters or people who were fans of my work from DeFi or collaborators previously basically got together and wanted to pool their money together and bid on it as a collective, so that kind of like this whole strength in numbers idea. And so they got together, formed a DAO literally on the spot, bid on it, and then won, named themselves after my artist name, so they're now called Pplpleasr DAO, and they are quite a prominent DAO in the space. And then another thing that's really cool is they kind of opened up people's eyes to the possibility of sort of pooling money together, because this was quite a novel concept for bidding on NFTs or just collective ownership at the time. So something that's really cool was that a bunch of different products and tools had spun up as a result of being inspired by Pplpleasr DAO. So Juicebox protocol being one, that's the one that people were using for Constitution DAO. Party DAO or Party Bid was also a product that was spun up as a result of being inspired by Pplpleasr DAO. So essentially they kind of kicked off this entire movement or new paradigm of DAOs and crowdfunding. And I think that's just a really cool part of, NFT history that will always be part of my story, which is really special. And then since then, I've just been, sort of creating artwork and, making projects in the NFT space that kind of align with, either my personal missions or causes that I care about, or, just spreading, I think, crypto to a more mainstream audience. For example, the Fortune magazine cover was one example. I also made a Vogue magazine cover as well. And I started a vault with Steve Aoki. It's called Please Aoki, where we sort of go around and collect artwork from female artists. And then most recently started the Shibuya project, which is the one that I talked about at the A650 conference.
That's awesome. I mean, this is so crazy how it's really fun to hear these tales. Every once in a while, I'll have the guest on the show where it's clear that it was, you were the one that really led the charge here and went out and proactively pitched and kind of got in front of these DeFi companies. And then there was a snowball effect where you got enough of them to where all of a sudden you started to make a name for yourself. And then the fans just kind of took it from there and really helped you launch this big sale, which you then parlayed and snowballed. It's like, it feels like you just keep stepping up your game as you go. Especially this latest project, because it's wild. Can you tell us about the project that you were sharing with us at the A16 conference?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Shibuya is sort of almost like a culmination of everything that has happened to me or that I've learned in my career so far. It starts from my love for storytelling. I think, watching WALL-E when I was in college sort of really changed my life and was what made me want to work in animation in the first place. So Shibuya is essentially you can think of it as like a decentralized interactive media platform. And so it's kind of like decentralized Netflix meets Kickstarter. And essentially you can use, sort of Web3 and the efficiency of, crowdfunding or pulling money together and, to incentivize projects and also empower creators. And so that's sort of what Shibuya does, provide that kind of tooling for creators to be able to easily fund and create projects without having to go through, traditional means of collecting funding or, getting the project greenlit, let's say. And, you can just kind of, you just kickstart it yourself, essentially. And the first IP that I'm launching on, or that we are launching on on Shibuya is called White Rabbit, and it's an interactive Web3 series that sort of follows almost like the Bandersnatch style, where the pilot episode ends with the main character coming across two doors, and then behind each door is an alternate ending. And, to watch one of the endings, you have to mint an NFT, which we're calling producer passes. And then so with this producer pass, you can also vote on sort of the ending that you like better, which will help shape the narrative of the next episode. And so in a way, the very act of minting this NFT, you're helping sort of fund and make this project happen. And then the act of voting is sort of helping to shape the general direction. And so as an audience, you're not only like a passive viewer, but you're also an active participant with the creation of the IP. And so that's sort of what White Rabbit is. It's done in a very sort of retro, nostalgic anime style. And then the story itself it's a metaphorical story about going down the rabbit hole of crypto, or sort of this very unique experience of being red pilled that I think we all go through. And, it's meant to be interpreted by each viewer. But I think that, if you have been through that process and you watch it, you'll pick up on, sort of like the nuances behind, all the Easter eggs that we put in and stuff. So yeah, it's kind of like a passion project of mine, but it's also a sandbox so that as we're, building out these tools, then we can roll them out into other IPs or make them available to other creators, and then become part of the Shibuya platform as we onboard more IPs there.
I was really curious when you created the White Rabbit, when you're building this, the second I saw some of the clips, it was very apparent to me that like a lot of thought and energy, and it has a very high production value. Like you look at it and you think, oh, this is some animation that I could see anywhere. It could be on Netflix. It could be on any major network. Like it's really high quality, well done animation. I'm curious, what about this? Like, what went into building this, building this world? Like how many people have you had to surround yourself with to pull off this level of animation? Obviously you have a lot of talent, but to do this solo would be insane. So there's a bit of that. And then I'm also curious, do you see this as a fun experiment, or do you see this as something that could be like the future of dynamic, like storytelling? Like, do you see it as potentially something that could fuel, much larger creations in the future?
I would hope so. It definitely started off as sort of a fun experiment. But I think, since we rolled it out, people are seeing sort of the potential of, having interactive media like this and why it could be so attractive for people to participate. We're constantly experimenting with new things like unique, viewership. So for example, it's interactive in the way that based on, things that you have in your wallet, you could be viewing a different version of the animation as opposed to somebody else. Or, we also have like NFT casting. So between chapter 2 and chapter 3, we held a round of, as we collaborated with Azuki, where anybody who had an Azuki can submit their Azuki for casting. And then the winning Azuki became a cameo character in the 3rd chapter. And so, these are just sort of examples that we are showing people how this kind of media can be made. I think it's not limited to distribution on just the Shibuya site. This is just where it's born. And I think that's what's most important here is that what White Rabbit is showing people is that, like you're seeing, for example, this high production value project that I was able to start it just because I wanted to, not, having to wait 3 years pitching it to a bunch of gatekeepers in Hollywood, and so forth. And, clearly, I have an idea and we have a vision, and then we execute it and people are enjoying it. And so in a way, it's, I would say, kind of revolutionizing the way that media is created. And I think that, if it's done right, then it can be quite disruptive, because then now, creators sort of have more power and going direct to the audience, as opposed to, having any sort of like middlemen for either distribution or even the creative process itself, which I feel like, often gets ruined with a lot of either sponsorships or producers who don't really know anything about actual creative process, right? And, to answer your question about how many people are involved in White Rabbit, well, I obviously couldn't have done this without my amazing co-founder and collaborator. His name is Maciej Kuciara. He's a super duper talented artist, and, White Rabbit wouldn't look this amazing without him. But the first 1 minute or so of animation was actually just me and him. So just the two of us. We made the first minute of animation. And then we put it on the site and then launched the producer pass NFTs and hoped for the best. And then we raised $1.2 million from that first 1 minute of animation. And then so that could then now, fund the rest of the series, which will then, upon completion, be stitched together into a short film, which I think is really cool and can be a case study for people to see, what is possible beyond just waiting to go the traditional way. But, with each new chapter, we were able to recruit more people so that we can make the content faster and, like you said, become even more high quality. So, starting from second chapter, we were able to hire a composer who wrote the score. And the third chapter, we had a composer and a screenwriter. And so I would say right now, there's probably about 15 people who touched the White Rabbit project, which is probably smaller than you were expecting.
Yeah, I mean, that's what a fantastic, really cool way to fund a project and then kind of basically staff up and build out over time. And it's such a powerful thing to involve the community every step of the way. I've never heard of pieces of this, but it makes a lot of sense to me that you'd look inside of someone's wallet and, it's like any of the algorithms that we interact with on a daily basis, meaning that when I come to Netflix, for example, the content that's shown to me and the order I'm receiving it in is based largely on what I've played in the past, right? And they're doing their best to recommend and say, hey, we think you might like this because you've enjoyed this in the past. Amazon's the same way, recommends products based on what I've purchased. You're kind of doing this for NFTs, and that you're saying, hey, I'm going to dynamically change a story timeline for you based on what NFTs you hold. Like, that's crazy. And it's also awesome. Like, if I hold something that, a chromie squiggle or something that is like special to me, that fact that story would modify and to dynamically to fit, my love and passion for these other types of things in some subtle way is just a lot of fun. Like, that's a pretty compelling, that's a fun use case. Like, talk to me more about like how have you unpacked what that might actually look like? Have you actually turned that on yet, or is that something that's still yet to come?
Yeah. So no, I completely agree with you. I think, part of this interactive viewing experience or sort of personalized viewing experience is one of the things that fascinates me most about creating something like this. And, I think as we sort of touch on this topic and with the recent, increased popularity of AI, I think you can start to imagine a future where these two sort of converge, and then all the possibilities that are then opened up by that merge. So, for example, I could prefer a certain animation style as opposed to somebody else, but we like the same story. So then maybe, based on the NFTs or something that we have in our wallets, then we can view the same sort of animation with the same story, but in a completely different style that's sort of personalized to our taste, is something that I find very, very fascinating and definitely possible in the future. And then apart from this, like you talked about how when you log into Netflix or when you log into Amazon, you have sort of like this history of things that you like, and that's all part of provenance, right? But these, in Web 2, these are all separated. But in Web 3, this provenance is all on chain, and it will be platformless. So, any kind of website that you're logging into, that data will be read and sort of interpreted right away, which I think is super awesome. And then on top of this, for example, with White Rabbit, we are rewarding people with what we're calling kind of like engagement tokens, let's say. And then so, upon just beyond just voting on, sort of like the outcome, it's like things like, how early did you vote? Like, how early did you watch this episode? Then you're sort of getting rewarded these attention tokens that, are based on a bonding curve, for example. So, based on, how early or late that you're participating. And then so we're kind of on-chain collecting data of these super fans. And, and then we're imagining like a future where, let's say there's like episode discussions happening. Then, with any kind of like a website or platform that I log onto or forum that's Web3, then I don't, they can just immediately tell, oh, you're a White Rabbit super fan because you have this many engagement or attention tokens as opposed to, somebody else who has less. And so, this is sort of just starting to tap into the iceberg of possibility of combining this kind of technology and why it's useful for media, let's say. And then, at the end of the day, I think sort of a North Star for us is just that I think good content is always going to be in demand regardless of market conditions. And so that's, at the end of the day, what we care about is just that we want to see things that we want to make things that people want to see. And, what better way than to just ask the audience directly, right? I feel like in Hollywood, there's so many projects or pieces of media that are just sort of made in a black box without any kind of input from, the audience. And then they sort of then come out and bring it out to the world. And they're like, what do you guys think? And it's kind of a crapshoot, right? Sometimes people love it and some people hate it. But what if, you can open up that process so that, sort of like the super fans are engaged from the very beginning and they can help you, understand what sort of their taste is and, where they would like to see this go.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I'm really curious, like, what are your thoughts on design by committee? Because, like, in some sense, the thing that I worry about, and I think about this a lot with our own community and things that we build, it's, there's something nice about having a point of view that is kind of top down, that's a vision that you execute against with some really talented people. And I worry that the more people you add into the equation, the more it becomes this just kind of like group think around, wouldn't it be great if, but it kind of like, you're not really, the wisdom of the crowds at that point is muddied a bit and it's not opinionated enough. And so you get just something that's mediocre because you get an average. And so I worry about that type of product building. It reminds me of like Snakes on a Plane or something like that, like movies that were like crowdsourced and or others that were like community driven. And you're like, wow, you really put everything in here, didn't you? Right? Well, first it's like cutting it down to something clean and opinionated. Does that, just what are your thoughts on that?
I absolutely share that concern. And I think, especially with White Rabbit, it's been an experiment. I think it's still a learning process, and we're trying to find that right balance. But this is something that I've known since the beginning, even before starting this project. I know that if you just let a community, or just hand it completely over to let them create something, it's going to be trash. I'm just going to put it out there. It's going to be really bad. And so, you need sort of some kind of creative head, like myself and Michelle at the top of the chain. And you'll actually find that I think oftentimes community members or, the audience, they don't actually want to do that much work either. They kind of want to be spoon-fed content, but then also just have this, just the right amount of input. And, I think things that will help you understand what this is, for example, would be lurking like Reddit discussions, of your favorite TV show or something. Always, there is some kind of unanimousness, I don't know if that's a real word, about, a certain opinion or something. So, for example, you see like the top comments are always, it's like the the most popular comments are always about a certain thing, or, people spotting Easter eggs, and, things that people like are often, very apparent on these sites that, let's say, have like karma or upvotes. And, so it's definitely worth sort of studying and going into these places to understand. I really, at the end of the day, I think movies and stuff are, or even on Rotten Tomatoes and stuff are popular for a reason, right? As much as a crowd or collective have sort of different or their own individual opinions, but there is a general sort of force or sway that is usually helpful. And, one case study I think that is a very apparent example of this is, I don't know if you've ever seen or heard about the Sonic the Hedgehog movie that came out a few years ago. So when the first trailer from that movie dropped, the movie hadn't even been completed yet. The design of Sonic was so bad that it just got so much hate. The moment it went on YouTube, so many downvotes. Everybody was like, "I hate this. Why is Sonic so ugly?" And had the producers or people behind this project just even consulted maybe more than like 5 people in the beginning, they probably would have realized it was bad before putting all this budget in. And then so what they ended up doing was retroactively going back and then completely redesigning the character and then redoing all of that CG, which is super expensive. So they sunk so much money in that just because they couldn't get the look of the character right. And, and then so obviously after they fixed it, then everyone was like, "Oh, this is so much better." But, how much money did they waste just because they weren't sort of engaged or, with their audience since the beginning? Right. And so this is, just like an example of that.
No, it's a great point. And it kind of echoes what my belief on community engagement around creativity, the creative process, and that it's almost like you want them to have a seat at the table and be able, and be part of the conversation, but not control the conversation.
Exactly.
Where you could still say, "I like that, but we're not going to do that." It's like you still want to have control of your baby. And on the choose your own adventure side, I take it you're like presenting 2 outcomes that you would be happy with regardless. It's not like you're saying go create an outcome. You're just presenting alternatives, and then they can kind of choose which path, both of which are acceptable to you as a creator. Is that correct in thinking that?
Yeah, that's exactly it.
That's awesome. So, okay, this gets stitched together. It goes out as its own standalone short film. That's going to be awesome. What's next? What's next for this project and if people hold this creative pass, I guess, or creator pass, or producer pass, I'm sorry. Did I get that right? Producer pass, right?
Yes, producer pass.
What chapter are you on now? How many chapters will there be? And then does this producer pass allow them access to other projects that are created on your platform, or is it just for White Rabbit?
So currently the producer passes are specific to White Rabbit because we don't have actually any other IPs on the platform, but that's going to change very, very soon. And so we are actually launching a new IP. It's a stop motion animation with Steve Aoki and Seth Green's studio. I would say it's probably announcing in like a week or so I can probably say it here. And the way that one is done is less of a choose your own adventure style, but the way that people can interact with that kind of media is more of like a Mad Lib style, which I think is something else that we're experimenting with, which will also be interesting to see. And so to answer your question, even though the producer passes are unique to White Rabbit, there will be other IPs on Shibuya, and then hopefully in the future, I think Shibuya kind of becomes almost like a giant media DAO, and then within that big umbrella DAO, then each IP is sort of like its own sub DAO, and then so hopefully there will be some kind of there is no current Shibuya token, but hopefully in the future there's going to be some kind of token transference between the IPs to like the master sort of Shibuya token, so that and then that kind of DAO will then sort of help green light or kickstart projects, or decide which projects that they want to onboard onto the platform, or be featured by the platform. And so that's sort of like really further down the line. And currently we have 3 chapters of White Rabbit out so far. And then for White Rabbit specifically, we're planning for 7 chapters. And then there will be, we are planning something for, at the end when you collect all 7 chapters, because there's a different producer pass for each chapter, actually. And so they're kind of like stamps.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, so they're kind of like stamps or movie tickets that you sort of collect, because every chapter, also has a different interactive way. So, the first episode was a choose your own adventure, like binary option, 2 options. The second chapter had 3 paths that you could choose from. And then the third chapter that just came out last month is sort of, it's like an interactive game or a llama game where actually with each wallet, a different sort of path is generated, but you don't know the path obviously until you play the game. And, and depending on what the path is, you might die if you go the wrong way. And then, upon completing this game, if you beat it, then you can insert a prompt that is AI related, that will sort of be what kind of helps to shape chapter 4. So every chapter has a different sort of engagement mechanism. And the idea is that when White Rabbit is completed, if you have all 7 chapter producer passes, then yes, that will sort of unlock something else or, but we won't spoil that or talk about that yet.
So that's fascinating. So in a crazy world, just curious to get your gut take on this. You go out, you collect each one of the producer passes for each chapter. It means you have the whole catalog of the actual film itself, the short film itself. Maybe it's not this, maybe it's a later one that you do that's full length, kind of full feature film. But if you license this to Netflix and there's royalties that come in, do you think of an entity that could distribute those royalties amongst the producers as well? Or is that just off the table thinking?
It's not off the table. I would say that we're being super careful about this because of securities laws. There's I think the SEC are so sensitive around things like this. But yes, in an ideal future, I think if royalties are used properly, with NFTs, and that's the whole point of sort of writing this into the smart contract, then I would love to see a world where that kind of system works and doesn't offend the SEC, let's say.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. Just before I asked the question, I was gonna put a caveat in there that it would probably have to be based, outside of the United States, if you're going to do an entity like that. But it is a fascinating idea that someone could come in, help bootstrap something from the get-go, and have some type of allocation to the rights to that particular thing long term. And in this world, it would have to be some type of investment vehicle. You'd have to be an accredited investor. There's a whole slew of different things you'd have to check off, and that this is a nightmare right now.
Exactly.
You don't want to go down that road, I'm sure.
Yeah. So unfortunately, the U.S. I think is sort of not as friendly for that. But yes, it is a fascinating concept, and I think that will be something that's truly transformative and disruptive to the current film industry, right? Which is so monopolized by just a few sort of power players, let's say. And the whole concept of decentralization is that we want to imagine this kind of future where we can all sort of co-create and co-share the benefits. So wouldn't that be nice, right? But, sort of talking about that, I think, something else that is interesting is that kind of holding those producer passes or those NFTs can be, already a vehicle for finding tastemakers in the future. So if I saw that you're somebody who literally minted from chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, all the way to chapter 7, then, that's, and let's say White Rabbit becomes like a legendary IP, like a Akira level or something, then that's what would, that provenance, on-chain provenance is what separates somebody from metaphorically or, in a current world sense of I've bought this Akira DVD as soon as it came out, or, I bought this 20 years later, because I saw that everyone else thought it was cool. It's like that distinction. But right now you can't ever prove that without just, you can talk about it, but yeah, in the future you can literally, you can't even fake that. And I think that's super cool.
Yeah, I do too. I really like what you're saying around this idea of one of the most valuable resources or assets that you have is this this community of super fans that are powering this. And it's not like you're not saying, hey, person with the most amount of ETH, go up and buy up these passes and you're the most important in our ecosystem. It's really, were you there? Are you participating? And you're proving that people are actually participating. And that's who you want more than anything else, is like these true fans that aren't bought fans. They're just like people that, meaning I didn't buy my way into being in your good favor. Like I've actually participated my way into that.
You have
world,
to earn
right?
it with your attention. And something else that we are doing that's very interesting around this is that based on your sort of the amount of those attention tokens that you hold, currently when you finish watching White Rabbit, at the end credits, we have like our executive producers, and then our producers, and then our associate producers, and they're all ETH addresses or ENSs, and it's all in the order of the attention tokens that you have. So the people who have the most attention tokens are our executive producers. So just because you bought producer passes, but if you didn't participate, then that means that you don't even make it into the credits. And then the credits are actually live and dynamic, so that they are constantly updating based on how many attention tokens you have.
That's fascinating. It is so cool. This is why I wanted to have you on, because I really respect product thinkers that are coming in and saying, okay, I know how we've done this for the last 100+ years. Like, how can we go and rethink the way that creativity is manifesting and that involves the community? I mean, it's such a beautiful thing, and it's really cool what you've done here. So, okay, a couple questions I still have for you are, you're early into this. I mean, you're not quite halfway through, it sounds like, on this whole process. And how can people still get involved? Like, where do they go? And how much of this have you unveiled to the public? Because at the time when you showed at A16, you were showing us stuff that hadn't been quite released yet. I take it that stuff is now public, or what can people see if they want to go check this out?
Yeah, if you go on our website, it's shibuya.xyz, then you can you don't even have to buy an NFTs or anything. You can just watch White Rabbit up until the point that it is completed. And so currently we have 3 chapters. You can watch all 3 chapters on our website. And chapter 4, we don't actually have a date yet right now for when it comes out. I'd imagine it's sometime during Q2 of this year. And then, when it does come out, you can follow us on Twitter. We're at Shibuya XYZ on Twitter. And, we'll usually, put out tweets, and then we also have a Discord, so you can follow along. I think there's a lot of people, who sort of joined after, like previous chapters. And then we are sort of also coming up with ways to keep people sort of not bored, let's say, between chapters, because high quality animation does take time to make and produce. And then so, like things that we've done already in the past, like the NFT casting, or, we also have sort of community artists or community events that are happening in between the creation of chapters. And then also, we're rolling out new IP as well. So that hopefully as Shibuya builds sort of their library of IPs, then, between chapters of each different IP, you'll have something else to watch. But I think, something that we want to be very cognizant of is that quality right now is very important. So my dream is to sort of be like the A24 of Web3. And, I feel like A24 kind of came out of nowhere, but, their logo is so iconic. And, when you watch a movie and then you think, oh, this is a great movie, and you just remember seeing the A24 logo before. And then so now when you see A24, here you just sort of have this memory attachment of, oh, this is going to be a good movie. And, they've been so tactful and selective about what they put out that, they've sort of maintained that. And that's something that I personally would love for Shibuya to have as well.
I love it. It's clear to me in everything that you've mentioned around the people that you've worked with and brought on for this project and others that you've partnered with on other projects, like you're surrounded by great creative minds. When you think about Web3 as a landscape, who do you think's doing it well? When you see other creators that you're just like, wow, they really inspire me. They're creating and shipping great products, communities that you admire. Just always curious to pick your brain on that stuff. Who are some of your favorites?
I was initially not paying that much attention to the Azuki project, but now that I have started paying more attention to what they're actually doing, I do actually really like, the stuff that they're putting out, and sort of like I feel like everything that they've put out has, actually a lot of thought behind it, even including their sort of collaboration with Ambush with like the PBT, like the physical hoodie, connection thing. I think is all really well done. So they're definitely a project that I have started paying a lot more attention to. In terms of other, I feel like, quite frankly, I don't pay that much attention to a lot of, let's say, larger projects in the NFT space. I think because, I've been sort of just not totally inspired by PFPs for a while. So, I've actually paid a lot more attention to individual artists or individual creators. So I see, especially on like Manifold, there's so many talented people there who are just putting out, their own creative renditions of an open edition or things like that are worth paying attention to. And then on top of that, I have to say, this is sort of maybe a hot take, but one of the reasons I started Shibuya as well is because I've seen that all of the media that's created in Web3 is just really bad. If you ask me if there's, any good ones, I really just haven't seen that much out there. I think it's due to a few factors. I think a lot of people coming into this space are not coming from a creative background. And on top of that, they have to create this content really quickly because of the short attention span and the volatility within the space. And so there's a lot of pressure to, just make something quickly. And, good content, I think always takes time to, even just in the ideating phase. And, that's just something that you can't really sort of beat around the bush with. And so, even if you have a lot of money or budget, you can hire a really high quality animation studio to make your, short film or idea. But that doesn't mean that it's going to be good if the story didn't have the proper amount of time to mature and be thought out.
Yeah, that's a great point. It turns out good businesses and great creative ventures do absolutely take time. They can't run the pace that everybody else does in Web3. And that's unfortunate because I feel like there's going to be the attention span, you're right, is relatively short for some individuals, and they'll lose interest and move on to the next thing that's, trending at that moment, which is, it's like catching a falling knife. It's going to be really tough, Yeah. So, but I got to say, I really respect all the stuff that you're putting out. It's very high quality. Really encourage everyone to go check it out. And what one last question for you. When you mint these next passes per chapter for these producer passes, does the price change per chapter, or what's the current mint price for when you go out next? We haven't announced the mint price for chapter 4 yet, but I can tell you they were different for every chapter before. So chapter 1 was a 0.08 mint price, and then chapter 2 was 0.06, I believe. It was either 0.06 or 0.07. I had to fact check that. And then chapter 3, actually, we didn't have a public mint. So chapter 3, and this is sort of maybe not alpha, but something for people's reference going forward, is that chapter 3, we actually only opened it up to people who had chapter 1 and chapter 2 and staked them. And then so if you had a pair, then you staked them, then you will be able to mint chapter 3 for free. So then, if you had 2 pairs, then you mint 2 chapter 3s and vice versa. So, that's how chapter 3 worked. And then so chapter 4 will probably be different as well. So people are just going to have to stay tuned. Awesome. I love it. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. Learned a lot today. And we'll have to have you, once you get that final film all compiled, when you're going to do the debut, you'll have to let us know so that we can get our audiences together to watch it. That'll be, oh my gosh, that would be amazing. Moment.
We could do a proof premiere for White Rabbit.
I love that. Let's make it happen. Let's go.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. All right, that is it for this episode. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you would like to help us out, head on over to proof.xyz and click on the reviews button at the very top and leave us a 5-star review. Thanks so much. Take care.